infrastructure? Yes. But that doesn't mean people should lose faith in the government. And that's what worries me the most about this election, because at the core, if people lose faith in their government, we really risk representative democracy as we know it. So that's why I'm so grateful that you all took the time to be here tonight. Because I think there are people trying to make a difference in Washington, and I'm one of them, who's trying to work with the other side, trying to come up with new ideas, trying to be creative, and trying to actually put forth bipartisan solutions against some of the big problems of the country and in my district, and serve for the common good of the citizens, which is why I consider it such a privilege to be your representative. So I will conclude before my mic goes out again. I think that was a hint by our skillful moderator there.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Duane. Again, just before we start, same rules. If I leave you a question, Mary will circulate, raise your hand. I'll start out with a couple of questions. So, in sticking with the theme of bipartisanship, when District 6 was redrawn a few years ago, many were dismayed by the structure of the new district to include parts of Montgomery County. What do you think about this, and would you favor a nonpartisan approach as Governor Hogan has suggested?
Yes, I would favor a nonpartisan approach. And in fact, I have the legislation in the Congress. I am the author of the legislation in the Congress to create independent commissions in every state in the United States to end the gerrymandering process, which is one of the most destructive. Well, my legislation does three things. The first thing it does is create independent commissions, which you can do. Some people say, oh, you can't do that under the Constitution. Justice Scalia, which no one ever accused of having a broad interpretation of the Constitution, but may he rest in peace, said that it was allowed under the elections laws. So our bill does that, creates independent commissions. Right? Second thing it does is create something called top two primaries, which means whoever gets the most amount of votes in a primary, whether they be Democrat or Republican, runs against each other in a general election. So conceivably, you could have two Republicans and two Democrats running in the general election. And the third thing it does, which is probably the least consequential, is it makes election day holiday. Because I'm all in favor of more people. So that is the signature legislation that deals with this issue nationally, which is the way it should be. But I think it's hypocritical to work on it nationally but say you don't support it in the state, and I do support it in the state. So I had nothing to do with the creation of the 6th congressional district. I was actually somewhat of a party crasher because this district was drawn for my opponent, and I entered 15 minutes before the final deadline as a last-minute kind of underdog entrant into the Democratic primary. But in truth, when you look at the map of Maryland, the 6th congressional district is not the most gerrymandered district. One of the issues with the 6th congressional district has is that Western Maryland, which is, for those of you who don't spend time in Western Maryland, it's an utterly beautiful place, fantastic people. But the 3 Western counties don't have enough citizens to become their own district. And so like a lot of places in the country that feel like, if you look at Maryland as a little panhandle, and these counties are in fact seem isolated from the rest of the state, that's true, which makes them not particularly contiguous to the rest of the district. But they have to be attached to something. And if you go back in the history books and you look at the older Maryland congressional districts, there was a district a long time ago that was, for a very long time, it was basically all of Montgomery County, all of Frederick, and the western counties. So it's not as, there are other districts in Maryland, by the way, that if you look at the map, really you want to turn your head away because they really do, not clear how they came up. But I'm absolutely all in, one of the national leaders on this issue. I've spoken to over 100 groups about this issue. I think when you go to the Congress, the one thing you realize, 80% to 85% of the congressional districts are on one side, which means the Democrat or Republican who has that district can't lose to another Democrat or Republican, to the opposing party, if you will, no matter what they do, right? So therefore, if you believe incentives matter in life, as someone spent my whole career in the private sector, incentives really do matter, right? If you get the right incentives, people behave according to that incentive system. have these safe districts, their incentive is to ignore half the country. Because they can never lose to those people in an election. Now, that's not what they should do. And a lot of these are really good people and they don't do that, but that's their incentive. Whereas if you put people in a competitive district, guess what? I mean, I'm sure in this room, certain in this room, there's Democrats, there's Republicans, and there's independents. For me to be successful in the 6th congressional district, guess what? I have to appeal to all of you. That's not true in a lot of districts in this country. And I think you're a much better legislator if you have to be responsible for all of your decisions.
Are you at all concerned about the influence of money in politics? And if so, how would you address it?
Yes, I am concerned about the influence of money in politics. I think we as a society cherish free speech, right? The most important constitutional principle. That puts us in a uniquely difficult position to get money completely out of politics. But I think the Citizens United decision, which basically allows an unlimited amount of money without any transparency, is disruptive to democracy, right? So I think where you would start is with that decision. Right? If you could do one thing around money in politics, you go with it. You know, I think there's other things to do, particularly around matching funds for elected officials who predominantly raise money from small donors. And I think there are one of my colleagues, John Summers, who's a good member of Congress from Maryland here, has some very good proposals to do that, which basically, he doesn't actually, in his formal proposal, doesn't effectively limit people's ability to give money to candidates. But what he does is he says if you're just raising small dollars, you basically get some matching funds to make yourself more competitive.
Question back here.
So I couldn't agree more that the bickering in the public sector, federal government is so very destructive to our society. So in this era of bipartisanship, can you provide any examples of where you broke against your party lines and voted for those that are against, that are on the other side of the aisle?
Sure. I'll give you, I can give you, I mean, it's such a long list. I'll give you one that I just dealt with on my way here, so it's fresh in mind. So there is a program in the District of Columbia called the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, which was a deal put in place, I don't know how long it's been, probably about 10 years, where the federal government provided additional money to DC in two respects. The first respect is they put up money for the DC voucher program. This is for kids to be able to go to independent schools. But the second thing they did is they put more money in the public school system. Right, so DC effectively gets more money in the public school system, and the federal government puts more money in this separate pot of money for these vouchers. And this has become, unfortunately, a very partisan issue. And I've seen the results of this program firsthand. I see that the kids, many of the kids, and not all these schools are perfect, by the way. Every once in a while you have some kind of independent school that's not particularly well credentialed, not doing a good job. But so many of them, particularly the Catholic schools where I've had a lot of interaction, are doing a really good job. And a lot of kids who are disadvantaged and poor are really getting a terrific educational experience. So only 2 Democrats voted for this bill, and I was one. And I did it solely because I've seen the results of this program up close. And I said, this is a good program. And I think the politics of this are all wrong. And I think that we support this program. So the reason I bring this up is I was at a meeting right before this forum talking about it, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. Most recently, I broke with my party on an issue related to probably something many in this room care about, which is Iran. And my Republican colleagues put forth a bill that required the government to disclose, to the extent it has the information, the financial assets of the government officials in Iran. And theory is that if you disclose this publicly and the citizens in Iran see that their government officials are ripping them off, stealing their money, it will put pressure internally on the government. The administration, the White House, indicated they would veto this bill, and they said we shouldn't do it. And their argument was a legitimate argument. They said that, I suppose, they said two things. One, a lot of this stuff is confidential, so we won't have to publish it anyhow. You can pass this law, but a lot of it is be confidential from an intelligence perspective, and that's an exemption in the law. And they also said it creates a lot of work to do all this stuff. And I thought those arguments were valid, and I was one of the few Democrats to break the party. I voted against my party on various defense funding bills that funded the Department of Defense above the sequester limits. My Republican colleagues used a kind of a clever funding trick using, I don't want to get into government budget speak, but there's a bunch of money that's set aside for overseas operations that doesn't formally run through the budget. That's a whole other discussion about how crazy the federal budget works. But trust me to say there's a federal budget, then there's like another pot of money. And they use that pot of money to fund defense at higher levels. So you now have this deal on the sequester, which is discretionary at a certain level. I told them my position on the sequester. But they put forth a budget that funded defense at a higher level and used this kind of extra pot of money to do that. And Mike looked at it carefully, and I was like, we're asking our military to do a lot these days. And the funding levels that they're putting forth in this budget is actually the right funding levels for what we're asking to do, so I voted for it. I mean, I could go on and on and on. You know, I take a lot of those. There's just a sample of things around a couple of different issues.
As a supporter of Israel, with Israel facing all these unpleasant people facing them, do you have any regrets about your support of the Iran deal?
No, I don't have regrets about it, which doesn't mean it was an easy decision, because I think the deal wasn't perfect in a lot of ways. And when I was analyzing the deal, my view was, if I was negotiating this deal, would I have tried to get a better deal? And the answer was yes. I'll tell you what I didn't like about it in a second. But I was asked to vote on the deal as it was and make the decision whether it was the right thing to do or not. So let me tell you the things I didn't like about the deal. I didn't like the duration of the deal. Right? I thought 15 years was too short. The reason I thought 15 years was too short is because I would like to see a deal that would sunset after the current cast of characters who we can't trust, who are running Iran, would definitively be out of power. 15 years is just too short. A bunch of them will be hanging around. I also thought there should have been broader limitations on other aspects of Iran's activities, particularly around ICBMs and missile programs. Ideally, the agreement would have covered their funding of terror, human rights issues, etc. But it was pretty clear early on that that was not going to be on the table. And that's a whole other discussion, because we still have an ability as a country to sanction those activities, which I've been a supporter of. I've put forth a bill that expands the Iran Sanction Act to cover other activities based on things they're doing, but that's another discussion. So it was pretty clear early on that this was a nuclear-only deal. The decision was made by both parties in their negotiation that they wouldn't include other things like funding of terror and human rights issues. It would just be about the nuclear capability of Iran. And as a nuclear-only deal, putting aside duration and putting aside other things about the deal that I would have liked to have included in the deal, I think it accomplished the central mission of the deal, which is it reduced 98% of Iran's low-level enriched uranium kind of material that they have, which is they've done. It's reduced their centrifuges by 2/3. It was a definitive agreement that Iran actually signed on paper that they would never pursue a nuclear weapon, right, which they actually agreed to, which has its own implications if they were to violate that, obviously, because they've actually agreed not to do it. And I think, in my opinion, looking at how the deal has unfolded since it was put in place, if you look at the largely independent analysis that's gone on, is Iran has not fulfill the spirit of the deal, right? Their testing of ICBMs and other things are inconsistent with the spirit of the deal, certainly. But as it relates to the letter of the nuclear aspects of the agreement, they have in fact fulfilled their obligations. And Iran's ability to be a nuclear state, which was kind of, in terms of threshold capacity, a couple weeks away at the low moment of this negotiation, is now, by most independent experts, at least a year away. So I don't regret the deal because I think what I was expecting to occur from the deal, which was that Iran would continue to violate the spirit of the deal, but hopefully would follow the letter of the agreement as it relates to nuclear capability. They have in fact done.
Good evening, sir. Thanks for being here tonight. Thank you. And I'm Mark King from Germantown, Maryland. Given the current situation in Europe, especially in Germany, and the impact that it's had on Angela Merkel and her political position and party, and given the current situation regarding the refugee situation, the Syrian refugee situation, what's your position on the Syrian refugee resettlement program underway by the current administration and the resettlement of these refugees in Montgomery County in particular at the invitation of the county commission?
So, the gentleman in the back asked where I voted, where I voted for my party. This was actually another area where I didn't vote with my party. Listen, what's going on in Syria is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, right? Epic proportions. And doing something, and I think the United States have already been critical of our foreign policy. The overwhelming amount of my criticism is focused on Syria, because I think that not engaging more with the rebels that we felt comfortable supporting, which is hard to do, not putting in place a no-fly zone when we could, not engaging in more limited military strikes when appropriate, I think has allowed this situation to escalate to the point it is now. And I think that the problem has been, in terms of the administration's Syria position, is I think the administration had a view that they couldn't do something in Syria unless they knew where it was going and where it would take them and how to get out. And the situation in Syria is so inherently complex that you couldn't know the answer to that. And Lincoln had a good expression, which is sometimes you can only paddle to the next bend in the river. And I think as it relates to Syria, we should have had more of that mindset, which is if we would have put in place a no-fly zone, and if we would have provided more aid to the rebels, I don't think you'd be able to say where that would take you. I mean, you're a retired military, thank you for your service. I think most of the military experts would have sat around the table and say, we don't know exactly where this takes us. Sometimes that doesn't mean you don't do it, right? So I think that's been a big fail. And I think as a result, we have a huge humanitarian crisis. As I said, half the Syrian population has been displaced from their homes. Well over 1 million have left the country. The United States has largely, certainly on a percentage basis, taken significantly fewer refugees than anywhere else in the world. Now, there's some obvious reasons for that, right? We're on the other side of the world. You know, they can't walk here, they can't really come here by boat. There was a bill that was put up in the Congress that was put up by my Republican colleagues. It basically said, as part of the resettlement process we have for Syrian refugees, which I think now is 100,000 people is our goal. I think it was 10,000, I think it's now 100,000. We require the administration to certify that they're following all the procedures as part of letting these people in the country. I voted for that bill, I was one of the few Democrats to do that. Because I thought, you know, what we're trying to balance here is a legitimate humanitarian issue. Right? You know, let's face it, refugees, the plight of refugees is an issue that is not, the Jewish community has some historical perspective on it. You have to have a humanitarian view when you look at this situation. And you have to try to do everything you can. But you also have to make sure the citizens of the United States are safe. So my view is we need to have more resources in the vetting process so that we can successfully settle refugees. But again, to the gentleman's question in the back, I broke with my party to make sure that those procedures were put in place.
Back here, and then we're going to hand over to you after, and then we'll put it back to the front.
Thank you very much, Congressman. My name is Sigurd Neubauer, and I'd like to...
Speak up.
My name is Sigurd Neubauer, and I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit back to the economy. And you mentioned in the introductory remarks some of the deficiencies, if you will, that the Democratic Party is going through. So my question is, as a centrist Democrat, what is, if I may so say, how do you see your role and the role of perhaps a decreasing breed of Democrats looking at the economy and how we can really move away from the sluggish economy and really bring back some of the talents that we have here in the United States and then create more opportunity? Because I think if we look at the national election, however you want to slice and dice it, there are a lot of people who are left out in this economy. There are a lot of people who are upset, whether you drive for Uber or whether you are on Wall Street. So how can we create a more competitive economy, and how can we move away from the kind of polarized debate around the economy? So that is my question to you. Thank you.
Right. So how do we create a more competitive economy? So first we have to look at the facts, right? As I said in the beginning, the dominant economic trends in the world are globalization, technological innovation, right? And these things have been enormously positive, enormously positive. So when I was born 50 years ago, low 50 years ago, round 50 years ago, about 20% of the world was interconnected globally, right? So it's taken the history of the world for 20% of the world to be interconnected. The rest of the world basically existed in this little village kind of community structure. And the global poverty rate, as measured by the percentage of countries where more than 50% of the population lives in poverty, was about 70%. So you had 20% of the world interconnected in poverty at about 70%. Fast forward 50 years, about 70% of the world is interconnected globally, right? So it took the history of the world to get 20%. The last 50 years, we've gone from 20 to 70. And the global poverty rate has gone down from about 70% to 25%, right? So anyone who thinks these trends are not positive is not looking at the facts. Because the sheer number of human beings that have been lifted out of poverty because of technological innovation and globalization is staggering. That's not the hand of God of what kind of thing it is. But that doesn't mean these trends have been positive for everyone, right?